Okie dokie artichoke. How's it going, guys? Welcome to this episode of Pete vs. Plants. I am Pete, and you can probably work out where the plants are and what they are, hopefully. So I thought I would do a little plant stories video today, mainly to just have a bit of a whinge, but also to just talk about plants. Everyone loves a little bit of plant chat, right? So anyway, who do we start with? Okay, so this Paraíso Verde, right in front of me here. Beautiful specimen. It had this really nice leaf. It has sort of paled off since I first got it. And I got it for a bargain. I think it was like, from memory, I can't even really remember, but it was under $100 for this single leaf. And it had what looked like at the time a node that was activating. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'll get this. You know, it's cheaper than an entire plant. I think it was probably about $70 with postage, which was a good deal at the time. Anyway, so I got it, and I think I chucked it straight into semi-hydro like this, and for about 3 months, it did nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was so shattered. I hate when people sell stuff online that has like an activated node. It looks like it's growing, right? The axial bud is activated and it's coming up, and you can see a little tip there. And you're just like, all right, sweet, I'm going to purchase this. I'm going to hit the ground running. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to have a large, luscious plant in no time. You get it, and it doesn't happen. And you're just like, what gives? Anyway, so months and months and months later, it started pushing out a growth point from below the leca. So I'm not sure if you can see here, but this petiole and this growth point are actually coming out next to this stump. And so they have sort of emerged from below the leca there. Obviously it was a node or two below the top here. So that was kind of interesting. I'm like, why would the top one here that's already activated and seemed to be alive, and it had like a leaf, a tiny, tiny little tip of a leaf, and it was green at the time, pushing out. I'm like, it's ready to go, mate. She's ready to pop. Just go. Why would you push out from all the way down there under the leca? Anyway, the plant decided to do that, and worst of all, it decided to do this. It reverted instantly. So yeah, FML, this is what it looked like originally. The first leaf to come out was this one. It does still have these beautiful little pink edges to the leaf. I'm not sure if you can really see there. Maybe, again, I'll use my forehead as a background, so hopefully you can make it out. Or maybe the background over here. Yeah, that's a little better. It's darker background there. So it is still a very pretty plant that I have pity for. Maybe I should have pity for myself. But it's not variegated anymore. And I thought, I'll give it a bit of light. So I've had it up against the window, and it's been getting a shit ton of sunlight, afternoon sunlight. I left it out there the other day, and I went to the Aroid Society meetup in Melbourne, and it turned out to be a really hot day with no clouds, and I left and I was like, oh shit, I left the curtains up. I left them up, so the sun's gonna come in and bleach everything. Fortunately, it didn't do too much damage, but this thing was facing the sun the entire time, and I'm not sure, maybe that's a little bit of chlorosis, I don't know, but yeah, as you can see, there's no variegation that is coming out, at least nothing like this. So yeah, and it was funny, I was chatting to AJ at the Aroid Society meetup thing. She is from Growing Grounds, so she's from Sydney. Check her out. I think I don't know if she's got a YouTube channel, but she's got a website. She sells plants, and she has amazing, exquisite plants, some of which I purchased on the day, some anthuriums. And she was like, did it revert? Did it revert? Straight away, did it revert? And I was like, damn, is this a common occurrence? Apparently it is. So anyway, that is an interesting story here with Paraíso Verde. When you purchase these, if you purchase these, it is something to be aware of. They can apparently revert very quickly. So if you're going to purchase these, something that you may want to do is either get an established plant that hasn't been cut, or to get a tip cutting, because then you know that it's not going to rely on any activation of axial buds, which is where you may have this reversion issue kind of occur. So I'm going to put this one aside over here, and I will show you the other one that I got, which I have also got in leca. Okay, so I grabbed this one because it was so reminiscent of a Ilsamanii, right? A Philodendron Ilsamanii, the variegated form. I just absolutely loved that minty variegation. It's also like the Ficus shivriana, if you guys have seen that, but I really, really, really am a huge fan of that kind of variegation. And I think the burly marks mint, which hasn't yet hit Australia, also is reminiscent of this and looks phenomenal. But yeah, massive fan of this. So when I saw this one come up, I grabbed it. I chucked it into Leca, and fortunately it is a tip cutting, and the good news is that it had a growth point that was slowly kind of emerging. I've had this one again probably about 2 or 3 months in Leca. Seems to be doing okay. It took a few months to kind of acclimate, or a month or two to acclimate, and then only in the last few weeks has it started, probably the last week, has it started working on that growth point there and pushing out a new leaf. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes and what we get out of it. But I imagine it's not going to have any trouble with reverting or anything like that because it's the growth point. So fingers crossed. The recent most leaf actually broke off in transit. So yeah, here's what that's looking like. The next one out is this one, and it's interesting to see how dark this one is to the next one down. And I wonder if that is related to the amount of light that it got after coming out. So yeah, it is really interesting. In my collection, it hasn't changed at all since I got it, and I have it sort of on the ground facing a 20-watt LED light and probably getting a bit of indirect sunlight as well. Maybe some direct sunlight in the afternoon too, but it seems to be going pretty well. I'm really glad that it is doing okay in Leca, and I'm keen to see what happens. It does look a little faded and fugly, if I am, 100% honest. So I really hope a bit of new growth comes out and starts, I don't know, adding a bit more mint variegation to my collection, right? So yeah, Paraíso Verde, that's sort of story number 1. I will get these out of the way and get on to the next story. All right, next interesting story, and I noticed this one yesterday and was kind of like, what the? So I have these 2 absolutely stunning specimens of Florida ghosts, right? They have these insanely pale leaves, and the petioles on the new leaves come out this kind of fluorescent pinky red kind of color. Anyway, so accidentally, I neglected them for probably about a week or so and forgot to water them. So they got underwatered, right? Now, the really interesting thing that's happened as a result of that was that the lowest most leaves didn't actually brown up at all and die off. As you can see, these oldest leaves are still on the plant and still look healthy and fine and are doing their job photosynthesizing. The interesting thing that happened was that the oldest white leaf, I think on both plants, and each of them had the tip of the leaf slowly turning green. So this sort of, I don't know if you want to call it a variant of the ghost, seems to push out loads and loads of these really milky, creamy white leaves, and they hold on to that milky creaminess for 3 or 4 leaves as the plant is pushing out more and more and more. And so the leaves that actually fell off, interestingly enough, were the oldest ones that were still white. So they were sort of halfway up the plant. And I haven't noticed that before. When I've underwatered things, usually it is the oldest leaves that suffer. They start browning off, they start crisping up, and they're the ones that sort of get jettisoned by the plant and chucked off. But obviously something's going on here, and I don't know enough biologically, but there must be some kind of mechanism by which the plant can work out which is the oldest most leaf that is doing the least amount of work in terms of photosynthesis and generating carbohydrates for the plant that we can turf. We'll start there. So there's obviously signals coming back from the leaves to the whole plant. I imagine, again, I'm not a botanist. I don't have that much training in botany. I had a little bit when I was doing my undergrad, but yeah, if you guys know anything about that, let me know, because it seemed really interesting that a leaf halfway up the plant, it literally within a few days, completely browned, fell off, and I found them on the floor. And it happened on both plants. So it wasn't just a freak occurrence on one, it seems to be a pattern that obviously the plant follows. So yeah, that was one story. Obviously, keep an eye on things and try and keep them watered sufficiently, but it's something that you may notice. Is that a goddamn spider mite? No, it's just something hanging under a web. If you underwater them, you may notice that happen. So keep an eye on it. And I'm not sure if you could prevent it once it starts. It's one of those things that it's probably like a cascading kind of event where once it gets going, there's no stopping it. But the good thing is the rest of the leaves look fine. So yeah, lesson learned. There's lesson number 2, or story number 2. It's getting a bit toasty, so I'm going to take my jumper off before story number 3. So I actually have 2 different pink princesses here. You may have seen me unboxing this one, and it looked a lot better when I originally unboxed it. But since getting it and chucking it in soil, I don't know if it was in a different medium when I got it, but when I put it in soil, it dropped a shit ton of leaves. It was looking fine up the top. These leaves all looked really nice, but everything down the bottom just started drooping and falling off. And I was just kind of like, God damn it. And annoyingly also, all of the really beautiful leaves started falling off. So the only ones that I really have here that are, you know, worth a gawk, worth a look, this one here and this one at the top. And I've noticed that they start to sort of fade to this kind of light pink color pretty quickly after coming out. I think there's only this most recent leaf and there's another leaf coming out, and then it was this one. And they obviously sold it when this one was the newest and looked the most vibrant. But yeah, so I think this one, I'm pretty sure this one is straight out of TC. Although the leaves do look a little thicker as they've matured, I think a key way of knowing whether or not it is a Pink Princess that's come out of TC is apparently, at least from what I've seen online and heard other people say, these thin leaves when it's in its juvenile form. Quite often you will see very, very thin leaves as opposed to the really thick, fat leaves that you're about to see on the other one, which I imagine isn't from TC. So yeah, this plant, it's, yeah, a bit of a troubled child. I thought it was going to be a really beautiful specimen, but I'm kind of bummed out on how it's going in my collection. It is getting really dark and nice and black, and I think if it were just this color, I would still be a big fan. But the fact that it's kind of, it can be a really pretty Pink Princess, but it kind of doesn't want to be, is the part that kind of bums me out a little bit with this one. So it is something to be aware of. When you purchase plants, they may take a turn for the worst initially when they're acclimating to your conditions. Yeah, so there's number one. Now, number two, and I should mention, I think I got this for about 80 bucks. Okay, so that was the sort of price range for this one when it looked a lot better, had a lot more variegation on different leaves, and was, yeah, fresh off the boat out of obviously amazing conditions wherever this was living. Now, for a while I've been hunting just a really, really good Pink Princess with almost like Thai constellation variegation. I feel like those two are probably pretty similar. I don't know how much work has been done on identifying the different types of variegation that plants have and comparing them to one another, working out, is this the same kind of biological genetic thing that's happening in this type that is in this type? But there are some that I've noticed, some plants that seem to be relatively stable like Thai constellations, and they seem to have that speckling, that sort of overall speckling to different degrees, and then the chunkiness, the blocks that come out of variegated blocks, right? And the Pink Princess seems to be, at least from my experience and what I've seen, it seems to be very similar in appearance. I have heard of them reverting, so perhaps there is still something different about them than the Thai constellations, because from what I understand, they don't revert ever. But yeah, so anyway, I saw this one come up, and this was a beautiful specimen. It was growing like an absolute beast. It was a tip cutting. It was $250, and they're the Pink Princesses that are still holding their value. The ones that have very low variegation have effectively hit rock bottom, and you can get them for 10, 20 bucks. But the ones that have very, very high variegation are still selling for, you know, low to middle triple digits. I've seen some going for like 500 bucks still. So to give you a look at this one, this is what it looks like. I am an absolute huge fan of this, and I hope I can maintain the quality of this plant. Now, I'm not sure if this is out of TC or not, and again, I don't know if it's an old wives' tale or whatever, but these leaves definitely look like the ones that I've seen on people's plants online who say that they are cuttings from the original Pink Princess, where they're a lot thicker, wider, fatter leaves. So as a comparison, here are the two. I'm not sure if it's really easy to tell, especially on the more mature growth on this one, but you'll see those thinner leaves down below. And this one seems to have these wider leaves all the way down. And granted, it is a tip cutting, so I haven't seen what was below this when the plant was initially growing out, so I could be wrong. Anyway, this one has come out and is absolutely gorgeous. And the best thing about this, besides the variegation, is the fact that look at the growth point there. It's shooting straight up. And as you can see out of the tip, it is pushing out a new leaf. And from what I've seen so far, it doesn't do the inchworming thing. And again, I don't know if this is because of the sort of parentage of this plant, if it came from the original one that was a very high quality specimen that had none of those issues. Every other pink princess that I've had has done that inchworming, just really irritating thing when the leaves get caught in the sheaths as they come out. I've just noticed actually, there is a morphological difference between these two. So the sheath, and this is really cool, I've never noticed this before, and I wonder if you guys can see what I'm about to tell you. Have a look at where the sheaths are on this plant. So if I hold this leaf, can you see the sheath there? And it's attached to the petiole of this leaf, right? Which is probably part of the reason that the inchworming thing happens, because the sheath is pulled down horizontally by the petiole as it comes out of the plant. And so the problem is that the new growth point is having to grow horizontally or curve out like this horizontally before it pokes up. And so the base of it ends up pushing up first higher and doing that inchworming thing, right? Where you get that sort of, what is it? I've heard also the Cinderella slipper, where the foot's kind of like not making it all the way in. So I've just noticed on this plant, all of the sheaths are actually attached, physically attached and part of the petiole. What do you notice with this one? Which is just what I've noticed. So these two things here aren't growth points. These are sheaths that have separated away from the growth point as it's come up. And what do you notice? So if you look down at this leaf, have a look at the petiole of this leaf. There's no sheath attached to it. The sheath is actually above the next node, and it is coming out by itself. Can you see that? Does that make sense? So on this plant, and it's very weird, I've just noticed too, this is blowing my mind today. At the base here, the sheaths are actually attached to the leaves. So perhaps as these things mature and get bigger and bigger, the sheaths start actually separating apart from the leaves, and it leads to leaves coming out more easily. That's really weird. That is really weird. You can see it was attached to this leaf, and then the next one up here, it doesn't have the sheath, nor does this one. So very weird, very weird. So I guess that the only bit that you should take out of this, I guess, guys, is that if you're in the market for a pink princess, obviously try and find a really highly variegated one. One, because it's going to hold its value. Two, because, I mean, subjectively, they're prettier. And three, if you can find one that is already doing this sort of, the sheath is coming apart and isn't attached to the petiole of a leaf, you're probably not going to have any issues with the inchworming thing with your leaves. So your leaves are much more likely to come out intact, beautiful, looking immaculate. Okay, so there is, I guess, story number 3, pink princesses. They are not all the same. Not every pink princess is made equal. White princesses. Now, I have an interesting story for you here. They're the same plant that I'm holding here, but one of them is very different from the other, as you can probably tell. So I picked this one up from Bunnings the other day, and I couldn't help myself because I saw this leaf. And I was like, that is freaking gorgeous. I would love to keep that in the collection. It's probably just a random, variegation aberrant thing that's just happened, and it's not necessarily going to repeat as more leaves come out, but I thought it was stunning and wanted to get it just in case. This was about, I think it was $50, $48.56 from Bunnings, so still pretty pricey for a white princess, but fingers crossed it's okay. Interestingly, it's kind of got all of these very short internodal spaces at the base here. So looks like it's quite an old plant, all things considered, for plants that are normally sold at somewhere like Bunnings. And a lot of these leaves have obviously fallen up or been taken off by the plant, but it does seem to be just one shoot coming up, although there is one that's just activated on the side here. And it's pushing out these larger leaves, and they, for the most part, look pretty nice. They're a bit warped and weird, and I'm not sure if that's just related to, the conditions that they were in, maybe traveling, maybe when they were getting watered at Bunnings. I don't know. We'll see how they go. The inchworming thing is kind of happening, and this variegation has sort of browned off, and yeah, the next leaf to come out is going to look like garbage. Worst case scenario, I can probably just propagate this guy and see, if we can get some nicer plants out of it. Now, this one is one that I bought from the same seller that I got that second, or the first Pink Princess that I mentioned, right? So I think, again, these are going to be out of TC. He will have grown these up in a greenhouse somewhere and then sold them as they got mature. And this thing is just insane. It blew my mind. When I first got it, I was like, what the hell is with all the different growth points on this plant? And when I repotted it, I tried to pull it apart and I couldn't really get in. It was so sort of thick and knotted with growth points at the base. I couldn't work out, is it actually multiple plants or is this just a single plant that has shot out a shitload of different growth points from the very base? And yeah, so I ended up not pulling it apart into multiple plants or propagating it and just chucking it into a pot here and seeing how it goes. This thing, as you can probably tell by the amount of foliage that is on here, dries out every second day and I have to water it. And the annoying thing is, its root system is doing okay, but it's just not yet ready for a bigger pot. So I'm thinking perhaps next time I repot this guy, I might use a bit of a denser mix that's gonna hold on to more moisture so I don't have to water it as frequently because it's pulling up so much water. And yeah, it's irritating me having to keep an eye on it all the time because I'm worried it's gonna cark it. As a result, I think, of my watering regime, some of these leaves have sort of yellowed off. A few of them are falling off all the time, but I think it's probably related either to a nutrient deficiency because of its size and it's not getting enough nutrients, or to the fact that it is just not getting watered consistently enough, at least for what it would like, right? If I treated the other plants in my collection like this one in terms of watering, they would all be dead from being overwatered. So the thing that is weird about this plant that I've noticed is that it grows like a burley marks. So a burley marks, if you guys don't know, I'll grab one so you can see. So this is a Philodendron burley marks. And the thing that makes these guys interesting is that they bush out. And they bush out because as they grow, they have a very strange or unique kind of pattern in terms of growth for philodendrons where each of the axial buds activates every time a new node comes out. So usually that doesn't happen on Monstera, Philodendron Syngoniums. Usually the axial bud's sort of sitting there waiting. If the tip breaks off or if a human propagates the plant by cutting it off, that axial bud will activate and then start shooting out new growth. This thing seems to do it automatically. And so that's why you get from what was a single plant right down the base here, you end up having, I've forgotten the name of that mythical creature where I think it's like Hercules is battling against it and he keeps chopping the heads off and then two come back on each neck. You know, it's sort of like that where you don't have to, in fact, you don't have to cut it. It just keeps shooting out, two, bifurcates, right? And so it's exponential growth. So it has that really interesting growth pattern, bushes out, and that's why the variegated ones are so affordable now because they are so easy to propagate and they end up creating such a bush of plant that you can propagate from. But they're just a really cool philodendron. Anyway, the thing I've noticed, weirdly enough, is that this guy is growing like the burl marks. Every single node that comes out seems to be activating. So I had a closer look at this plant the other day and I mentioned it, I think, in my October favorites video, which I'll link above. And I was saying it was a really cool buy, I thought, because I got this and it had like 6 growth points. And I was like, fucking winner. I'll buy that, I'll chop it up, propagate it, and I'll get 6 for the price of 1. Now, it has probably about 20 to 30 growth points in here, which is just mind-boggling. So if you actually have a closer look, you will see these sorts of growth points with these leaves curled up coming out of everywhere. And there's a good example right in here. See that tiny little leaf there coming off this petiole, this stem? That has activated behind the sheath of this leaf that I'm pressing down on, but the actual main stem was this one going up the top here, right? And you can see that it's about to shoot out a new leaf by the looks of it. Oh no, this is the new leaf here. And so, yeah, there are everywhere. There's another example here. This one's coming out of this part here. There's one that's sort of curling up here at the back. There's another one in here. It's just like every single node seems to activate and the thing is just bushing out like this. And so if you pull the top out, there are actually so many different nodes that have activated in there and are coming out. So it is just the weirdest thing. I've never seen this on another philodendron. I've only seen this kind of a growth pattern on the bell marks. I'm wondering if it's something to do with the TC process and that there can be mutations that occur, even though when TC is being done on a single plant, right? So they take tissue from one original mother plant and they put it through the tissue culture process in order to get tens, hundreds, thousands from that original plant. Mutations can still take place. And that is why you end up with things like Thai constellations that have different variegation levels. It's because there are still somewhat small mutations that can happen by chance during the early stages of the tissue culture process. And it's probably because a lot of the time what they use are when you do some propagations in water and you see the calluses that sort of appear on the stem of the plant, that is undifferentiated cell growth. It's kind of like stem cells from what I understand. And so what happens in tissue culture, one method of tissue culture is to take those cells, the callus, and use that to grow out other plants. But because they're at that stage of being sort of undifferentiated cells, so they haven't decided which part of the plant they're going to be, you can give them hormone, they'll become roots. You can give them different hormone, they'll become shoots. You can give them a mix and both will grow. Because the cells haven't decided yet, they can still have mutations occur and you can have weird things happen to plants. And that's how also you'll find a lot of these plants are coming out with variegation now, right? Like the variegated UPI, there's a whole bunch of these. The variegated Spirit of Sanctity. I'm not sure if they've done it in order to get variegation out of that plant, because I know someone grew it out of seed and found variegation. But what you can do is just create thousands upon thousands of plants using the callus from, say, the surface of a cutting in water, and eventually one of them will be variegated. And so that's how they sort of brute force it in order to find variegated versions of effectively every plant under the sun. They just use a shitload of callus to create thousands upon thousands of TC plants, and eventually one of them will be variegated, and then they can just use that to go through the TC process. But they could use nodes to hold on to that variegation instead of using the callus, if that makes sense. So I think that's what's happened here with this girl. I think some sort of a mutation has obviously happened when it was taken in tissue culture, and it is behaving similar to the Burley Marks philodendron, where there is just constant node activation. And I'll show you an example here on this guy. You can probably see let's see if I can show you right in here. God, it's hard with all these leaves. There is a growth point here that is activated on the side coming out of an axial bud, and this one as well. And you can see that it originally came out of the side of this larger stem, which has come up and become this leaf. And another cool thing to notice is that, look, the sheaths are coming off the side here. And I wonder if we go down, do they attach to the leaves? They do. Look, that might just be a philodendron thing. These earlier leaves have the sheath kind of attached to the petiole of the leaf. God, we're learning something today, guys. How crazy is that? I'm learning something. Not that I don't learn things. I learn things every day. So anyway, Pink Princess, White Princess is a very interesting plant, and it's going to be interesting to see when I chop and prop this one, because I'm going to have to at the end of the day. It's going to just become some monstrosity of a bush otherwise. That is literally, look how thick the stem space is in there. Like, it is literally just stem after stem after stem in there, and these leaves aren't really sizing up. I wanted a large specimen similar to this one that I could grow up a moss pole or something and have beautiful leaves on it. Check out Claire's from Jungle Haven on YouTube. I'll link her channel below, but she has an absolutely immaculate specimen that almost looks like some kind of variegated monstera with no fenestrations on the leaves. You just sort of like look at it from behind and you're like, what the fuck? That thing is insane. So go check hers out. But yeah, I would love one of those. But at the moment, I have this thing. It just doesn't seem to be gaining any height. It's just coming out the sides like that. So there you go. All right, the last one for the day I wanted to talk about is this plant. So I think this is Silver Dragon. At least that's what it's labelled here as in Australia. Fungus gnat, you little bastard. So the reason that I have this fungus gnat is because I have this in the original potting mix from the nursery, and I only got this one a few weeks ago. So I probably only watered it once with the tanlin that I use. If you're wanting to deal with fungus gnats, yeah, use eye drops. Don't use eye drops. use tanlin. It is a great tool. You just add a drop of this for every, I think, 2 litres of water, and it includes a ton of crystals that expand when they are eaten by fungus gnats. So yeah, they die alien style. So anyway, I got this plant, and I got it because it was immaculate. It had this leaf when I got it, and I was just like, God damn. Because when I first got into my plant journey, well, alocasia and indoor plants, like what would you say, aroid plants, right? I picked up this monstrosity, and I don't know what the hell is wrong with the thing. It didn't have the yellowing, but it was just every single leaf was kind of mangled and just, you know, a bit of a crispy critter. I think this is sort of one of the most normal looking leaves, but then you just get these weird, wonky, crispy critter looking leaves. And I think since getting it probably about 6 months ago, 6 months, it's given me this. And that's it. And for those of you who don't know, the sawdust on top of this is from where I was using predatory mites to deal with spider mites that I found in the collection. I'll link the video above, you can see how I did that. But yeah, there's sawdust on all of my plants at the moment because that's the medium that they come in, and you sort of teaspoon it out onto everything. So anyway, it's done absolutely nothing. I don't get it. I had transplanted it into my aroid mix, and it seems to be healthy. It hasn't been dropping leaves, so I don't know the deal. Some of them have been browning off. I'm not sure if that is just infrequent watering, potentially. That could be the issue. I don't know. This one's just been a massive pain in the butt. So that was why when I saw this one, and I wonder if I've still got the price on here. I don't. I saw this one, I was like, I'm getting it. And I'm probably going to throw this one away because, yeah, it's hurting my soul. I don't know. You could probably just put this up online and be like, rare silver alocasia, dragon alocasia, aberrant form, right? Like, whoa, you know, check it out. And someone would buy it because, yeah, people do that all the time. They get some kind of weird mutant leaves and they'll just label it as something like rare mutation, no ID, aberrant form. And you're kind of like, is it really? Is it just sickly? Is it just dying? Like, could it just be dying? It's not variegation. The plant is dying from mosaic virus, right? Like, yeah, I see that all the time and it hurts my soul. Anyway, I think the reason that this thing has been so slow to grow, is that it started pushing out inflorescence. And what I have noticed with the alocasia is they seem to push out 3 at a time. I don't know if you guys have seen that before, but I've noticed it also on the Aglaonema. They seem to always push out 3. Maybe it's just been the plants that I've had, but I've bought them with 3. I've bought them and they pushed out 3. It seems to be this pattern of 3. And the annoying thing I've found with these inflorescences is that the plant puts all of its energy into it, and even if you just let it do its thing, it won't get any new growth whilst it's pushing those out, and it'll tend to push out multiples. And 2, once it's finished, even if you leave them there or you chop them off, it takes forever for new leaves to come through. It is the most frustrating thing. I think I've got a green dragon that's over there that is just 2 leaves and has been 2 leaves since I got it, and it was one of the ones that had 3 inflorescences on it when I got it. I chopped them off because I was like, get out of here. I want more leaves, and it's done nothing for like 4 months. And then I also got a sculprum, an Alocasia sculprum, the Samarlance, and it did the same thing. Quickly after getting it, it looked great, looked amazing, and then pushed out inflorescences, pushed out 3 of them. I think I don't know if I let them all come out the whole way or gave them the chop. Maybe I did midway through. Same thing though. It's probably been about 2.5 months, no leaves. It's just been the remainder that were there and it's doing nothing. So yeah, I understand if you're not hybridizing the plants or breeding them or doing anything like that, it is a massive pain in the butt if they start pushing out inflorescences like that, but I think that's obviously just part of spring, right? And we're in spring at the moment in the southern hemisphere. So I'm really hoping that this one doesn't start doing that, and if it does, I'm probably just going to give it the chop immediately. But this one has. Now, the only thing that I am really using to consider keeping this thing is perhaps collecting the pollen and trying to fertilize, or pollinate rather, other alocasias in my collection, because it would be kind of cool to create some hybrids. I've seen people doing that, but I don't know how easy or hard it is. I imagine that it's similar to other aroids, but I wouldn't mind doing that. I think that would be kind of cool. The only thing I'm worried about is that it may pass on this weird genetic aberrant form appearance, which is something that I'm not really a fan of. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm just a hater. Maybe, you know, even the ugly ducklings deserve a bit of attention, but yeah. Anyway, so that's probably enough, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Tell me a story, right? Leave a story down in the comments below and let me know what plants have been doing weird stuff in your collection or that you've noticed after growing them out. And yeah, check out this video and I'll see you there. Tooroo.